Welcome to Startup Confidential, what industry insiders will never tell you that you need to know if you're building a consumer brand. With your host, best-selling author of Ramping Your Brand, Dr. James Richardson. Let's do this.
Welcome to episode 129, the 6 elements of a good strategic plan. So the point of a strategic plan is to create an objective roadmap for growth and how to get there so that the company can prioritize what to do and what to spend money on. In its absence, companies tend to waste money on poorly thought out experiments and even make inappropriate hiring decisions based on impulsive thinking. The irony of all those overfunded startups you've read about is that they have so much money they can afford a non-strategic, confused spray and pray approach to growth. The cash pile buys time to clean up the mess created by poor planning. Undercapitalized consumer brands don't have that luxury. They need to be much smarter, much earlier on to spend limited cash wisely and to deploy limited staff hours on productive execution, not just a whole bunch of shiny shit. So here are the 6 components that you need. A strategy, a competitive theory of capturing money from other categories with a specific consumer audience. In my book, Ramping Your Brand, I boil this down to using initial sales and research to isolate your high-value outcomes and the attribute outcome signal tied to heavy usage among your fans. This becomes the behavioral basis of your business growth, anchored primarily in product and packaging design. Top-line revenue goals should be realistic based on category case studies, broker data, and your degree of competitive advantage. If same-store sales growth is in the double digits and is driving most of your growth, you may be a candidate for acceleration to exponential growth. Of course, you need to be ready to supply and to fund that kind of growth. It's easier to sell in 100% growth, especially to new accounts, than it is to service them professionally. That's the trap. You need to have a 4P playbook, which is essentially how you plan to pursue the strategy that you have outlined. Now, as I discuss in my book, Ramping Your Brand, the pyramid of causality in consumer packaged goods begins with your product, including its packaging symbolism. This needs to be the whole thing needs to be unbelievably memorable to minimize your need to pay for awareness building. You need early fans to do most of the marketing for you through word of mouth. I swear. This has to happen, especially if you're in phase 1. Because that's the time when you can barely cover fixed operating costs, certainly not a whole bunch of social media advertising. So that playbook is going to have your product line detailed, the list of UPCs and their key competitively advantaged attributes. It's going to outline your placement approach. Essentially this is your sales plan by channel and relevant retail banners, your promotional plan. It'll be very trade biased in the beginning, but also your consumer promotional activities that you think are going to attract the right people to where you're selling, and your pricing plan, which will be very simple in the beginning, including any role in discounting that you want to assign, and honestly, which is usually forced by the retailer. The 4th component would be an operational plan, essentially how you plan to produce the required units that your strategy and your revenue targets are asking for. This is going to contain a detailed map of your supply chain and all of its costs, especially variable ones, and those subject to market forces like ingredient costs. You're also going to need a unit production plan as part of that to ensure that you have excess units beyond, i.e. more than your target, required by your target revenue goal. You want to pay for extra storage of excess inventory. You do not want to run out. This operational plan will also contain your cost of goods, your gross profit per unit to inform your budget, and the planning of the working capital you need to fund operations. Okay, component 5 is a master budget for all of the above. And this has to rely on maximum team labor until you have outside investment, or you simply are larger and can start to hire in help. Some quick notes on budget management as you grow. It's essential to keep your budget minimal in phase 1 and phase 2 so that your gross profits cover fixed operating costs. You may raise seed money to cover their initial MOQs, minimum order quantities, from commands, and But it's the high fixed operating costs that are going to drive you quickly out of business, including those getting your stuff into distribution to retailers. And needless to say, this doesn't include boutique salaries that you can't afford. This is the period where you've got to sweat like hell, even if you have raised seed money. And that can be hard to do if you've actually raised an above average amount, shall we say. My experience is that, and I've talked elsewhere about this a lot recently, credit card founders generally never make it out of the debt funnel. You can't seed businesses in consumer packaged goods this way. But you also can't spend, dry powder that you have raised from your seed pile sloppily in the beginning. That's when you can least afford to screw up with how you spend things, because you don't know what in your playbook is actually working to drive the business growth. Once you know what's going on, it's going to be easier to budget for more investment. So you've got to have cash on hand for the future, but you've got to have it to cover unforeseen issues in the supply chain, to keep yourself going. If the COVID pandemic wasn't a good wake-up call for that, I don't know what else I can add to you. But those kinds of unforeseen issues in supply chain, they happen all the time throughout the industry. It doesn't just take a pandemic. And the other reason to have cash, some of your seed money available as cash on hand, is because you want to allow yourself the opportunity to seize opportunities, including stocking up on ingredients and other things that work towards your early survival. The playbook that you are investing in and budgeting for has got to be really smart and based on small tests. And this is all the more true today, in the middle of the 2020s, post-glory years, now that there's less and less venture capital available to founders. And the final component to a strategic plan kit, so to speak, is that you have to forecast the financial impact of big risks to any component above in your plan. The biggest annual risk in an omni-channel CPG brand, especially early on when you don't have a lot of leverage with the trade, is that a retail account you're planning to get into, because so far the conversation's been going well, somehow doesn't take you on. Or you have to walk away from a bad deal that went into the plan, but it kind of fell apart the closer you got to shipping pallets, right? That could be because of a gross margin problem, a revenue model problem, a whole bunch of things. Or, bad shelf placement handed to you at the last second. It could include a gross margin loss due to sudden COGS increase they didn't see coming. Last year's major retail rollout isn't going as planned, leading to poor velocities, which is then causing you to delay new UPCs till you can fix what's going on. These are all the things that you want to be thinking about as risks that you can, even in a rough sense, forecast what that impact would be. And do this, what I would call pessimistic homework, every year, so that your budget will essentially be shifting to preserve and maintain cash on hand, working capital for emergency issues like the ones I just mentioned that do crop up. Now, all of this really careful thinking that I'm promoting on this episode, if you do it, it's going to change how you think about fundraising, especially the timeline, the time to raise money to fund your strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years for your business is not when you need it to service a new account and not to cover some fixed operating costs that are suddenly way too high. No. You can't be reactive. You always need to be networking for cash and need to be raising it largely before you need it on literally the basis of your past performance as a business and the high level of trust that people are putting into you as an operator. That's all I've got for strategic planning, folks. Be safe out there.
Thanks for listening. Remember, Dr. Richardson has loads of resources for founders at premiumgrowthsolutions.com. And when you're on his site, don't forget to take his founders quiz and see if you're ready to ride the skate ramp of exponential growth.